being liberated from the old labels, caricatures, boxes you were trying to fit in or have or get into your life in some way or another, and that the sort of like capacity to simply maybe be yourself without those labels, those boxes, those expectations, those concepts, those sort of guiding who you think that you need to be. And I can appreciate how liberating that is. I could also sort of see how, pardon the language here, that's all well and good for you, but that's not how other people will see you when you show up in a public forum, because, it is totally natural, normal, and like, biologically, neurologically ingrained in us that we assess the world through higher order representations, stereotypes, schemas, etc. That's how our brain saves energy, gets us into lots of trouble, in a lot of ways. A lot of times it can be quite toxic.
I feel like it's a good way to teach.
But it's also just how we end up perceiving people. That's the first pass, right? And then, if we're mature enough, we give ourselves the opportunity to be wrong. And then to learn who these people really are. Now
the teaching part.
Right now, here's where I'm going with this is that, as someone in the public sphere speaking on psychedelics, you're going to be subject to the models, stereotypes, schemas that other people have for you, and I'm wondering. We spoke a little bit about this question before the interview kind of began. I'm wondering if you could speak to a bit of what it has been like for you to step into the sort of public sphere of, maybe you don't agree with this term, but like advocacy or education around psychedelics as a Black woman.
It's been fun. And I say that with a very serious tone. Not the kind of fun you'd expect. People who don't want to give me a chance learn a lot from me because of their reaction to me. And I teach through appearances. I found that out through my studies with Buddhism, that the path that I'm on is not an easy path. And I found it out through my Lakota elders and other spiritual people in my life who told me that I have a specific kind of purpose. That purpose is to teach through experiences and to dissolve illusions. So a lot of people are going to create illusions naturally about me, and I'm at peace with that. And when they eventually take their mushrooms, or if they don't take their mushrooms, or just experience life with me, they're going to find out that the stereotypes they made about me aren't true. And it's going to make them question their perception of reality just a little bit, just enough little bit of grit to polish a pearl. Like, I'm the sand in the oyster shell that either pisses people off, or eventually they see the fruit of it, the pearl, and they really, really, really appreciate it because it, Kilindi opened doors for people like me to have a voice. But it also means that people who have been historically known in the community, famous mycologists who have mycology degrees, etc., look at me automatically as someone who's in counterculture or in that spiritual woo-woo consciousness culture. And the truth is, to them, I am. And that's just fine because I am a citizen scientist. And eventually I will have several PhDs. As a matter of fact, I'm applying to UC Berkeley's psychedelic facilitation program next year. And I'll be going to Harvard as well. I was accepted to Harvard when I was 12 years old. And I don't plan to just stop with my academic career. Whatever they think about me is going to be shattered. And it's not going to matter 20 years from now when I'm doing the best work I can for my community. People's opinions of me really don't matter to me, even though sometimes their assumptions hurt. And I give it permission to hurt because I know that I've also been someone who made false assumptions about someone else. I eventually, like we talked about earlier, came to really appreciate, like Kilindi. I made a lot of assumptions about him, and through my assumptions, I learned that I was absolutely wrong and that I didn't really know anything that I thought I knew about pseudoscience, let alone about older forms of science or exploration that exist. If you Google theoretical physics, the first Wikipedia ad says the ancient Greeks and Romans were the first people to actually explore the ontological relationship of our universe. And I found out through history that that's absolutely not true. So theoretical physics is based on a Western philosophical point of view that was birthed by Aristotle and Plato and all of Socrates. But there are tons of philosophers, including African philosophers and Aztec philosophers and Taoist philosophers, whose philosophies could have built a natural science of our world that we completely ignore because of Western elitism. We think that Western philosophy is one thing and that no other philosophies should be considered as civilized, i.e. civilization. And so I'm the one who's going to do my best for the next 30 or 40 years, if I have that long, to learn as much as I can about alternate views, because I know that I have blind spots even right now that I can't even name. And those blind spots are going to create a cultural insensitivity to other people's views or notions about reality, and also my views and notions of reality as a result. So what I think right now is the best way that I can be of service is to remain completely present and not get lost on what people see me as. Because the second I get lost in what people see me as, I lose myself.
Do you feel as though there's like you said, doing your best for your community? I'm not sure, how or who you identify as being a part of that community.
Human community.
Do you feel as though you have sort of like that you have some sort of responsibility to your sort of your demographic, your being in the public sphere as a Black woman? Do you feel like you have a responsibility to other Black women in psychedelic culture, or even in general?
Yes.
Because of your position of public capacity?
I feel like I want to do Kilindi's legacy honor and justice, and represent as someone who isn't out here trying to make money off people, isn't trying to spread a bunch of psychotic conscious rumors about what the nature of reality is. I want to be known as someone who was an explorer and a traveler, just like Kilindi was, just as an explorer, though, because that's what I do. I'm a curious mind, and I love a challenge, and I've always been that way. I even asked my parents, even when I was a tiny little kid, before I ever knew psychedelics existed. My mom named me this, Acacia, and Kilindi was the first person who could pronounce Acacia correctly that I saw on YouTube. And many people weren't talking about Acacia confusia back then. I didn't even know about Acacia confusia until I was like in my late teens. And a lot of people assume that I've named myself this. A lot of people assume that somehow I think I'm better than anyone else, and I don't. And for me, it's more about being a good example of someone who has left specific toxic feelings and emotions that were hurting my life, like depression and suicidal depression, behind, and help others who are feeling suicide and depressed to find beauty in this world and find some sort of way to explore their purpose, and so that they can live their purpose and live well. And I feel like, like one of my best friends the other day called me and was like, yeah, I'm thinking about committing suicide. And I've had many friends commit suicide. I've had 4 friends die this year, one of suicide. And they're very close friends I've known for over 10 years or 15 years. I'm about to go to the Atlanta psychedelic conference where we're honoring my friend Chief Nighthawk, Tellis Johnson, worked with San Pedro and mushrooms, and was very well regarded in his Atlanta community for his work, bridging the gap between Native American and African heritage, because there's a huge link in this country. My own grandfather was a Chickasaw freedman, James Smith. And so for me, it's one of those things where I feel like I have a responsibility to show up in a way that uses Occam's razor. I'm not out here trying to share a bunch of nonsense, and I'm not out here to try and give tarot card readings either. I'm serious about my work. This is my life. And I feel like part of why I'm here is to help people to self-initiate, self-explore, self-actualize, and self-empower. Because I'm just a person exploring like anyone else. And I think that people are looking for other people to hold their hand and to teach them how to do these things. But the truth is, it's not for me to teach. It's for the person to teach themselves. I feel like that is the only way I really learned. I wasn't taking Kilindi's teachings just so that I could say I knew something. I was taking Kilindi's teachings so that I could go and find out for myself. And that's what he encouraged. He never encouraged his ideas be accepted as reality. He encouraged that people went and explored those realities for themselves and made their own conclusions based on experience. And honestly, if that's not a psychedelic science, I don't know what is.